Okay, so throughout this course so far, I've learned not only the scientific side of natural disasters, but the information presented has also allowed me to make further assumptions about the social and economic aspects of disasters. So we've discussed like pretty heavily earthquakes and volcanoes so far, and also like the interconnectedness between these natural disasters. So according to the textbook, plate tectonics is the foundation in which we can understand how earthquakes actually work. Because the earth is divided into large plates that are always moving, we can study the places where the plates actually interact, and these places are called boundaries. So the three boundaries we talk about are convergent, divergent, and transform. And convergent are when the plates are colliding, divergent are when the plates move apart, and transform is when like the plates slide past each other. So a few more important aspects of earthquakes that we've learned about are, for one, like seismic waves. And this is when stress along a fault line is like exceeding the strength of the rocks. So this interaction results in energy being released in like these seismic waves. So gonna go into like deeper into this. It's just that the waves can be divided into two parts or two types, and it's primary waves, which is like P waves, and secondary waves, which is like S waves. The difference between them is basically just that P waves are faster and they can travel through like solid and liquid, and S waves are slower and they can only go through solids. So another thing to talk about when it comes to earthquakes is like the focus and the epicenter. So the point actually within the earth where the earthquake originates is called the focus, and then the point directly above that is called the epicenter. So like the epicenter is like in the crust, and the focus is like actually deeper into earth. And then through the depth and location of the focus, we can actually determine the characteristics of like the earthquake, like what it's going to be like. So moving on to volcanoes, about like a summary of what we learned so far, kind of. I can first talk about how like magma's formed. So according to the textbook again, volcanic eruptions are actually driven by the movement of molten rock through or not through, called magma. And magma forms beneath the earth's surface when rock melts because of like high temperatures or high pressure. So that's how magma's formed. And we learned in our course so far that the highest viscosity of magma is called felsic magma, and the lowest viscosity of magma is like mafic magma. So another aspect of volcanoes that we've been learning about is that so water and dissolved gas in magma is actually what influences like explosiveness and stuff. So whether or not the magma has gas or water in it is what's going to determine whether or not it's like exploding or if it's like flowing like lava. So some types of volcanoes that we've been learning about in specific are, one is like stratovolcanoes, which I can describe through the eruptions being like really violent and explosive. And also they have like steep sides, so the sides can be like super high, and the shape is more like symmetrical. It's more of like a symmetrical cone. And another type is a shield volcano, and something about this volcano is that it's more likely to have like lava flows rather than like super like big eruptions. And so after talking about volcanoes and earthquakes for a little bit, I just want to tie them together a bit about the interconnectedness. So it's important to like note that volcanic eruptions can trigger earthquakes, and tectonic plate movements can influence volcanic activity. So in that way, they're kind of like bonded, I guess. Like they like heavily relate to each other, and they both occur like usually along plate boundaries, like although there can be exceptions and stuff. So moving on from that, when it comes to the other side of like what we've been learning about is like some of the assumptions we can make when it comes to like social culture, different examples. So when it comes to disaster preparedness, one like important theme that we've been seeing is like how scientific knowledge plays in disaster preparedness. So we know that places with like good monitoring, like we learned about like the GPS system, good monitoring systems and education, and like people who have more professionals and people like actually track like whose professions are to track these like disasters, they're like better equipped to respond. And that means that those places are better off in terms of facing a disaster because they can prepare better and also react better. So the citizens have more warning, they know what to do more. And the places without those resources that get hit by like disasters like eruptions or earthquakes, they're often like way worse off facing these challenges during these disasters because they're not as prepared. And a really important aspect that communities are trying to, like more developed communities are trying to get to these lesser developed communities, is like this preparedness because it can save a lot of lives. So an interesting example that we talked about was the L'Aquila earthquake in Italy, and that killed like a lot of people, hundreds of people, and it also demolished a big part of the city, and it happened in like 2009. And afterwards the Italian government like arrested a bunch of scientists and like an official, I think, and put them on trial for like actually manslaughter. And this whole story that I'm talking about gives like insight onto this whole preparedness dimension, because scientists and government officials like play a big role in this preparedness, and how it can kind of, this earthquake can describe to you how like proper early intervention using modern technology is like a must nowadays. And if a country has it, then it's like within their right for the citizens to be using that technology to like be saved from these things, like to have early warning. And that didn't happen in this case, so there's a lot of like politics involved, but it's really the theme I would say I got from that is how important preparedness and intervention can be, like how much of a difference it can make between like people being dead or alive. And another aspect that's like important to mention is like the influence of cultural and socioeconomic factors on people's decisions to live in these hazardous areas. Some communities choose to inhabit these regions because of like historical or cultural ties, like some indigenous communities in like Chile, for example, while others, they need to inhabit these places because there's just limited housing options. They don't have the means to leave. This relationship between culture, economics, geography, like the tie between those three is actually what like shapes like people's vulnerability to disasters. Because like, for example, something we've talked about too is like earthquakes or like disasters in Haiti. And even though people in that region are like affected by earthquakes really often, they can't just leave, like they don't have the means to do that. And so they know they live in a vulnerable zone, but that doesn't mean they can do anything about it. Because there's an economic crisis happening in that country, and a lot of those citizens don't have the means to just like be better off like living somewhere else or whatever. Like they can't just do that. So it's important to take that into context, that people are like they can't just leave, they have to live in areas with disaster risk. And so it's like our responsibility to like help as much as we can in other countries with either education or interference, preparedness, or post intervention, like to help them out after disaster. So I would just say, to wrap it up, is that like understanding these dynamics, whether it comes to preparedness or like the social, cultural, economic side of it, is really important if we want to work towards like a better world that handles these disasters more efficiently. And in this future world, we can hope that like tectonic hazards like volcanoes and earthquakes can be handled better and communities can recover easier. So thank you.